Hey everybody, really quickly before we get into the episode today, my Discord is finally live, so if you're interested in that at all, please click the link in the description and join the Discord, where you can share your story there. You can show off your merch that you recently purchased. You can talk to other subscribers and or listeners, including myself, in the general chat and in the audio channel as well. So I'm planning on having live shows that are in my Discord for Patreon members, as well as the YouTube bonus tier people, as well as just anybody that's in the Discord in general. So if that interests you at all, follow that link and join the Discord, and I really hope to see you in there. And one final other thing, my new Creepy and Cozy tee is officially live on my website, so if that interests you at all, the link for that will be in the description, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, it will be in the pinned comment. Really stoked, probably my favorite design thus far that I've gotten to do, so if that interests you at all, I'd love to see you in one of my shirts, if you know what I'm saying. All right, I will shut up now and we can get into the actual episode. Cheers. I've never been the type to scare easily. I grew up in a very big city, and I took public transportation at night. I lived alone for years when I first moved out. I knew how to take care of myself, and I knew how to stay aware of my surroundings. So when my grandparents asked if I'd house sit for them while they took this month-long trip to Bali, I jumped at the chance. Their place was a dream. Huge house, massive backyard, a pool, and even an indoor gym. And don't forget, the master backyard. It was the perfect summer setup. They even let me use their Lexus, which meant I don't have to take the bus to work every day anymore. Win-win. Those first few weeks were smooth. My routine settled into something very easy. Worked my shifts at the cafe in the morning, came back in the afternoon, let their old retriever, Moose, out in the yard and water the plants. Spend the rest of the day relaxing. I'd throw on some Netflix, swim laps in the pool, work out a little if I was feeling really motivated. I really enjoyed the privacy. No roommates, no neighbors on the other side of a shared wall. Just me in a house that I had all to myself. It was a massive upgrade compared to the apartment that I shared with one of my friends. The neighborhood itself was pretty quiet, mostly older folks who kept to themselves. The houses were also spread out, each one with big hedges and tall fences, making it easy to forget that anybody else really lived nearby at all. The next door neighbor, an older guy named Ron, I'd see him a couple of times when I pulled into the driveway. Short, balding, always in this ratty tank top. He never waved, he never smiled. He just stood out in his yard, smoking cigarettes, watching. The first time I saw him, I figured he was just one of those nosy old men, probably making sure I wasn't some kind of squatter. But the way his eyes lingered on me for far too long, the way he stood in his yard just staring, yeah, well, it got weird really quickly. I brushed it off. I'm a young woman living alone, and I'm used to men being, well, creepy. It wasn't anything new. This guy had probably been living in the same house, seeing those same people for God knows how long, or how many decades now, so. On one particular afternoon, I got home late from work and decided to go for a swim. The sun was brutal, heat waves rippling off the pavement. I changed into my bikini, grabbed a towel, and dove into the pool. That cold water shocking my skin, but it felt incredible. I took my time floating on my back, enjoying that solitude. And then out of nowhere, I heard movement. I turned my head just in time to catch a glimpse of something over the fence. A quick flash of a face, a head of thinning gray hair. Ron, peeking over the wall, just the top of his head barely even visible. If he hadn't moved, I may have never even noticed him. Immediately, a spike of irritation ran through me. I sat up in the water and wiped my face, stared back at him. "Can I help you?" I called out. No response, he just ducked down and disappeared behind the fence. The hairs on my arms prickled. Now this was beyond creepy, especially me being all alone. I shook it off, but something in my gut told me this wasn't the last time I was going to see him. I stayed in the pool for a little longer, trying to convince myself that it's nothing. Maybe he wasn't watching me. Maybe he wasn't just passing by. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I knew what I saw, and I knew what he was doing. The way his head barely peeked over the fence, the way he disappeared the second I called him out. It was on purpose. Still, I'm not gonna let some creepy old man ruin my summer. I climbed out of the pool, grabbed my towel, and moved to the patio furniture, tucking myself behind the hedge that was blocked almost all the way from view. I laid back in the sun, letting the heat burn the water off my skin. I closed my eyes, reminding myself to relax, and before I knew it, I drifted off. When I awoke, the sun had shifted, dipping lower into the sky. My skin was warm, my limbs were heavy with sleep. I sat up and stretched and checked the time on my phone. Around an hour had gone by. The backyard was just quiet and peaceful. No wonder I'd slept for so long. I glanced back towards the fence, expecting to see a head now peering over, but there was nothing greeting me. Still, the unease from earlier crept back in, that prickling sense of being watched. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I grabbed my towel, my flip-flops, and headed back inside. I locked the door behind me, shutting the blinds, then turned on the oven to preheat for some dinner. I was still kind of groggy, so I decided to take a shower before I started dinner. I stripped off my bikini and let the water run over me, trying to push all those creepy thoughts of Ron out of my head. The house is locked, Moose was snoozing in the hallway. I'm being ridiculous. Except, I could not shake that feeling that I was no longer alone. I stood in the shower just listening, the water drumming against the tiles, steam curling around me. Nothing. I finished up and wrapped myself in a towel, wiped the condensation off the mirror. My face stared back at me, eyes slightly puffy from the sleep. I shook my head at myself and honestly just laughed a little under my breath. You're losing it, I said. I tossed the towel onto the counter and padded naked into the kitchen, my mind already on dinner. I grabbed a snack, then walked over to check the oven. The display was dark. Weird. I could have sworn the first thing I did was turn it on before I showered. I frowned. I'm sure that I turned it on. I reached out and pressed the button again. The light clicked on. The temperature showed 375 degrees. The oven was warm. I hadn't imagined turning it on. My stomach nodded. I stepped back and stared at it, my mind now scrambling for some form of an explanation. Did I turn it off earlier and just forget? Had I turned it off without realizing it? No way. I mean, I know I was groggy, but I wasn't that out of it. How did that even happen? I felt a rush of cold, a deep, sinking dread pooling in my gut. Parts of me started to get clammy, my nerves firing from the confusion. I turned and scanned the house. The living room was dark and the blinds were drawn. The hallway stretched out ahead, leading toward the bedroom. All right, I needed to get dressed if I was going to figure this out. I moved quickly, my bare feet silent against the floor, and when I reached the bedroom, I flipped on the light and there was somebody on my bed. A man, lying on his side, propped up on an elbow, like he belonged there. Naked. As he turned his head toward me, my stomach dropped to the floor. It was Ron. His pale, bloated body sank into the comforter, his sagging skin covered in a fine sheen of sweat. He was smiling, his yellow teeth peeking through these dry, cracked lips. "Hey there," he said. "Took you long enough. Wasn't sure you'd find me." My breath had completely left my lungs and did not return. My brain was stalling, refusing to process what I was actually looking at. This was a freak show, and I had front row seats. My heart, my lungs, everything started to thrum together in this symphony of panic. I screamed, a raw, blood-curdling shriek that leveled the house. Ron moved. He slid off the bed with ease that didn't match his heavy body, his bare feet slapping against the wood. He stared at me, still smiling, hands out like he was gonna tickle me. I realized then that we were both naked and this is exactly what he wanted. I started moving. I bolted down the hall, my feet barely even touching the ground. Behind me, I heard him slowly moving forward, those sticky footsteps, like he wasn't in any kind of rush. His feet sounded like they were covered in something sticky too. My heart pounded and my vision blurred at the edges. The bathroom. I need to get to the bathroom. It was the only one with a lock internally on the door. I lunged inside and slammed the door shut, locked it just as his weight hit the other side. The door shook, but it held. I backed up and looked for anything to use or throw as a weapon. I pressed myself up against the far wall, my breath coming in these sharp, painful bursts. I could hear him outside, standing there, shuffling around. Then I heard a sound that truly turned my blood to ice. He fucking knocked. 3 soft taps.
Is Darcy home?
Darcy was my grandmother's name, so I didn't really know what to think of that. His voice was low, almost polite, like we were having a conversation over the fence. I clapped my hand over my mouth, stifling a whimper. Another knock came.
Still in there?
I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking. My legs were cramping, but I didn't dare move. Minutes passed, and footsteps slowly fading down the hall. I waited, muscles locked and barely even breathing. Then the front door creaked open and shut. More silence followed. I stayed right there in that bathroom for what felt like hours, listening and waiting. When I finally opened the door, the house was empty. But I knew he'd been there all along. I have no idea how long he was there or how long he'd been inside for before I'd even seen him. He must have slipped in while I was having my nap outside, or maybe even earlier, who knows. I didn't sleep well that night. I wanted to call my grandparents, but there wasn't a consistent way to call them at that private resort they were at. I continuously checked the locks, hundreds of times it seemed like, pacing the house with a knife clutching my shaking hand. Every shadow felt like it was stretching toward me. Every creak of the house made my breath hitch in my throat. I kept seeing phantoms out of the corner of my eyes, ready to stab each and every one of them. He'd been inside, while I showered, while I walked around completely unaware. He turned off the oven, and he'd been watching. That thought made me sick. I kept waiting to hear the front door rattle, to hear him knock again, that soft and polite knock, asking if my grandma was home. Nothing happened. I spent that night curled up in the corner of my bedroom, Moose pressed up against my side. I could feel his body vibrating with tension, the way he whined lowly in his throat. He knew something was wrong. The following morning, I called the police. The officers were polite but skeptical. "Are you sure it was him inside the house?" one of them asked, as he was jotting his notes into his little pad. "Could it have been, I don't know, a misunderstanding?" A misunderstanding? What a fucking joke. I clenched my teeth. "I saw him in my bed," I said. "He was naked, he chased me. That's not a misunderstanding." The officer nodded back like he believed me, but I could see it on his face. There's no proof, no signs of forced entry, nothing stolen or broken, and of course, no witnesses. Just my word against Ron's. They went to his house next and talked to him. Came back 10 minutes later shaking their heads at me. "Ma'am, he claims he was home all night long." And all I could do in response was laugh. "Yeah, well, he's fucking lying. He was here." The officers exchanged a glance between them, and one of them sighed. "Look, we can file a report, but unless he comes back or tries something again, there's really not much we can do." And that was that. That was literally all they could offer me. I locked the house down like Fort Knox after that though, double-checking the windows, jammed a chair under the front doorknob. I barely slept. I barely ate. Every time I walked down that hallway, I expected Ron to appear again, stretching out on that comforter, waiting for me. A few days passed, then a week, and no sign of him. But I knew he was still out there, watching. Occasionally, I still caught glimpses of him sometimes, just past the fence. I'd be standing at the kitchen window, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd see movement, a shape shifting just beyond the hedges. I never saw his face, but I felt him. I felt that presence. I considered leaving and telling my grandparents that I just couldn't do it anymore, but part of me refused to let him win. I kept a knife under my pillow, always carried my keys in my fist when I took Moose outside. If he was going to come back, I'd be ready. My grandparents got home at the end of the month and I told them everything. Of course, per usual, they didn't believe me at first, but when I described the way he knocked on the bathroom door, the way he said my grandmother's name, my grandpa's face darkened immediately. That fucking son of a bitch. It turns out, they've had issues with Ron before. Nothing serious, just small things. Standing too close when my grandmother got the mail. Asking far too many personal questions. They would always write it off as him being lonely. A little weird, but harmless, you know? They ended up getting an order of protection, which essentially meant Ron couldn't legally come onto the property. If he did, it meant the cops would come for real and serve him with a legit restraining order. Anything beyond that was just going to be either jail or consequences dealt straight from my grandpa. We haven't seen much of Ron since, but I bet the bank he still peeks over the fence from time to time. I used to babysit my cousin a lot when we were both younger. My mom and aunt were very close, so we spent a lot of time together, especially in the summers. They'd take off for an afternoon shopping, brunch, whatever it was, and I'd be left in charge of my cousin, Adam. It was never really a big deal. Adam was a pretty cool kid, only a few years younger than I. I was a freshman in high school and he was in 6th grade. Old enough to hang out, but young enough that he still thought I was the coolest guy in the world. Babysitting him never felt like a chore. We'd play video games, toss the football around in the backyard, raid the fridge for snacks my aunt usually wouldn't let him eat. No bedtime and no rules, and he loved it. This day in particular, the story I'm going to tell you, it really wasn't any different than previously. My mom had dropped me off at my aunt's house just before noon. I waved her off, watching as she and my aunt pulled out of the driveway, laughing about something on the radio. "All right, dude," I said, clapping Adam on the shoulder. "What's the plan? Halo? Call of Duty?" Adam just grinned back. "COD for sure." And that's how the next hour or two disappeared. The house was warm, and the sun was streaming through those big windows, the smell of cut grass drifting in from outside. We played round after round, trash talking to one another. Adam getting a little too competitive, per usual. Honestly, it was just one of those perfect summer afternoons that didn't feel like anything important, just another awesome day. At some point, I got up and grabbed a few snacks. Adam barely even looked up from the screen, too focused on the match itself. I wandered in the kitchen, already picturing what junk food I could scrape together. And that's when something in the air kind of shifted. I'm sure you know the feeling I'm talking about, like you're suddenly hyper-aware. Like when somebody's staring at you from across a crowded room. That slow creeping sensation that makes the back of your neck prickle. I hesitated at the fridge, one hand still on the handle, glancing toward the back door. The curtain over the window fluttered slightly. The door was closed and nothing really looked out of place, but that feeling was not going away. I stepped closer and peered outside. Nothing, just the small alley between the houses. Usual trash bins lined up against the fence. Quiet, normal. I found myself reaching up and turned the lock, just in case. I shook that feeling off and immediately went back to the fridge. I had just pulled out a pack of string cheese when movement now caught my eye. Across the kitchen through the window over the sink was a man, standing outside. Filthy and matted hair, sunken eyes, clothes so stained they barely even had a color. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking in the other direction, into the living room, at Adam. For a second, I didn't move. I was frozen, brain stalling, like I couldn't process exactly what I was seeing. The guy was just standing there, inches from the glass, his face remaining blank. Then slowly he lifted a hand and pressed it to the window. His fingers left these greasy smears immediately on the glass, and something cold then slid down my spine. I dropped that pack of cheese on the counter and grabbed the closest thing I could find, this heavy meat tenderizer from the dish rack. My other hand was immediately fumbling for the phone in my pocket. I backed away from the kitchen, forcing myself to move slowly, to not run. Running means panic, and running also meant tipping him off that I knew he was there. I had to keep it cool in order to make sure this guy stayed outside. I make it back to the living room, forced a fake smile. "Hey, Adam, let's go upstairs for a little bit, man." Adam barely even looking up at me. "What? Why would we do that?" "No reason, just let's switch it up. I think my back's starting to cramp sitting on this couch." He groaned, but left the match that we were in. "Fine." I kept my eyes on the kitchen as we headed for the stairs. The man at the window still hadn't moved. He was still watching, and oddly enough, seemed to only be looking at my cousin. When we reached the front door, I turned the lock and yanked it tight. If that back door had been unlocked, what else was? How many different points of entry did we leave open? We both climbed the stairs quickly. My pulse was hammering in my throat. I ushered Adam into his bedroom, shut the door, and locked it as well. And that got his attention. What's wrong?" His voice was small now, the way it got when something was off, but didn't want to be too scared. He looked at me, the meat tenderizer still in my hand, and dread now creeping over his face. He looked like he thought I brought it up here to kill him. I found myself not sugarcoating anything. I want his fear to be justified, but I also want him to know that I'm protecting him. "Look, there's a man outside. I saw him looking in through the kitchen window. He was watching, well, you." Adam's face went pale, his mouth opened up, but nothing came out. "We're gonna be fine," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "I'm calling the cops. They'll be here soon. We're gonna stay quiet, keep the lights off, and just wait." Adam nodded back. He was a really good kid, and he knew how to listen. I pressed my back against the door and slid until I was sitting, my legs braced up. I pulled my phone out and dialed.
911, what's your emergency?
I swallowed. "There's a man outside my aunt's house. He was looking in through the window. I don't know if he's still out there, but I locked the doors, and we're upstairs." The dispatcher's voice was calm, but I could hear her typing fast.
Can you describe him to me?
Homeless looking, filthy, white guy, stringy hair. Looked like he hadn't slept in weeks.
Are the doors locked?
"Yes, ma'am."
Address?
I rattled it off to her, hoping it was right.
Stay where you are. Officers are en route.
I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Okay, thank you."
Can you stay on the line?
"I should probably call my mom." She hesitated, but responded.
All right. Call back if anything changes. How many of you are there in the house?
"Just two, me and my cousin."
Are you both kids?
"Yeah."
Boys?
"Yes."
Okay, I'll inform the officers. 3 subjects, 2 boys in the house, and 1 intruder. We're on the way. Remember, call back if something else happens.
"Okay." I hung up. Adam was watching me, gripping the edge of his bed so hard his knuckles were white. I dialed my mom. No answer, of course. I tried again. Then the sound of breaking glass rang out through the house. It was unmistakable. The barrier was now broken, as this guy was inside. Adam jumped, and I went rigid. Then we heard footsteps, heavy and slow, creeping through the bottom floor. Adam whispered to me, "He's in the house." I didn't respond to him. I just squeezed that meat tenderizer tighter, feeling the weight of it. The footsteps moved throughout the kitchen, then through the dining room, slow and steady the whole time, like he had all the time in the world. I hit call on my mom's number again, and this time she finally answered.
Hey, sweetie, what's up?
She sounded distracted. "Mom, there's somebody inside the house." Silence, and then I got back an explosive. "What?" I exhaled, trying to stay quiet. "I called the cops. He broke in. I don't know what he wants, but he's still downstairs. He broke the window and we're both up in Adam's room." My mom swore.
We're coming home. Stay quiet. Hide.
I just hung up. Adam was shaking, but he moved fast. He dug into his desk drawer and pulled out a small pocket knife, flipping the blade open. He had this look on his face now that like 3 inches of steel was all he needed to turn this whole situation around. If it wasn't for the situation, I would have laughed. "You ever used that, bud?" "No." I just nodded. "Look, stay behind me, but keep it handy. If this gets crazy, I am gonna need your help. Don't panic, just focus, stay with me." The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, and that's when they stopped. A brief moment of nothing, then slowly, they started ascending up, one step after another. Each footfall made the floor creak. He was so close now that I actually could feel his weight in the wood of the house. We both were holding our breath. The steps paused at the top. He turned left and toward the bathroom. We heard the water run. He'd went to the sink for some reason, a slow trickle like he was playing with the faucet. Then more silence followed. Footsteps, now moving toward the master bedroom. A closet door opened, then shut. A drawer slid open, then another. I gritted my teeth. The hell is this guy doing? Robbing the place? Was there actually even a plan here? Adam looked at me with his eyes wide. I shook my head and mouthed to him, "Stay still." The footsteps began again, into the hallway, closer, now right outside Adam's door. We can hear him breathing, heavy, like he was standing there listening. I tensed up, my whole body coiling. The footsteps then moved away, and then thankfully, we heard it, sirens. A car door slammed and voices. We could hear voices outside wandering the property. They made no attempt at being quiet. They probably wanted everybody to know and be aware of their presence. The cops had seen the shattered window, and it became a lot more serious. They then proceeded checking all the doors. In my flight from the first floor, I'd locked both of them, effectively locking out the help as well. It didn't matter though. They scrambled over to the broken window, cleared the glass, and came in that same way. "Police! Everybody inside, make yourself known." The cops. Those footsteps downstairs sped up and the front door creaked open, and more footsteps followed. I heard the guy start going downstairs, and the officers shouted orders when they saw him, which sent him right back up to the second floor. A couple of officers came up the stairs, nice and easy, still barking out orders. There was a scuffle, a grunt, and some more heavy breathing. And then back to silence. I think Adam was about to hyperventilate, and I felt my body sagging. I'd been pushing up against the door with all my strength, not even realizing what I was doing. We waited until we heard an officer knock at the bedroom door. "All clear, boys. You can come out now, wherever you are." I unlocked it, and a tall police officer stood there, his badge glinting in that hallway light. He smiled politely when he saw us both in there, almost like a movie scene. He studied us. "You both okay?" I nodded, and Adam did too, but he still looked pretty stunned. The cop sighed. "Well, we got him. He's just an escapee from this psychiatric hospital. He's got a real violent history though. You did good, kids, calling it in. He's been a top priority since he got out." I felt lightheaded. The cop gestured for us to come downstairs. "I think your mom just pulled in. Let's get you two out of here." I didn't need to be told twice. My mom was out of the car before it even fully stopped, and my aunt was right behind her. She ran up the driveway, eyes wild, her breath hitching like she just finished sprinting some kind of marathon. "Are you okay?" She grabbed me by the shoulder, squeezing hard and scanning my face like she was expecting to see some bruises or cuts. I nodded, but I still felt like I was moving through syrup. My limbs were heavy and slow. "Yeah, Mom, we're okay." Adam's mom then pulled him into this crushing hug, rocking him side to side as she muttered under her breath, half prayers and half curses. The cops had that guy in cuffs by the squad car, but I refused to look at him again. I didn't want to see his face, didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing just how bad he scared both of us. One of the officers came over. He was younger, maybe in his late 20s. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, like he'd done most of the wrestling in that confrontation. His lip even looked busted. "The boys are pretty lucky," he said. "He's been missing for a few days, walked right out of the hospital in Manitoba. No one knows how he made it this far. Apparently, he's been breaking into houses all over, squatting when people aren't home. And none of what he's saying to us is making any sense." My mom just scoffed. "I don't think he was looking to squat here. It looked like he wanted our boys." The officer exhaled through his nose, glancing at Adam, who was still white as a sheet. "Yeah, well, we don't know what we're looking at here, but we will be in touch." Then they took him away. We went back inside, though nobody really wanted to, especially me and Adam. That kitchen window was smashed. Jagged shards of glass lay all over the counter and floor. The living room felt wrong, used, like somebody had been making themselves really comfortable there. And upstairs, that bathroom sink was still running. Adam refused to sleep in his bed that night, and I don't blame him. My mom obviously offered up our house to my aunt and cousin, who packed up and followed us over that night. Our house was safe and secure, didn't have a broken window. It made sense to offer them up a few nights of peace and security after such a crazy incident. We ended up camping out in the living room with the lights on, TV humming in the background. Nobody really slept though. We didn't talk about what happened, just kind of sat there, staring at the flickering screen, pretending it was just another one of those summer nights. I could tell Adam was on edge, but he seemed to loosen up and relax eventually, becoming his old self as the night went on. That following day, my aunt installed this security system, double locks on the doors, motion lights, the whole 9 yards, on top of a brand new window. But it didn't really matter, because the truth was locks don't stop people like that. And that thought continued to keep me up for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear it, those heavy boots on the stairs, breathing just outside the door, and that feeling of being watched lingered on. Eventually, summer came to an end, and my mom stopped asking me if I was okay because I always answered yes, even though I wasn't sure if that was true. Adam never talked about it again, not even once. But I'll tell you this, to this day, he still sleeps with a knife underneath his pillow, and I, for one, don't blame him. The divorce was inevitable. By 2003, our marriage had eroded past the point of repair. My husband, Mark, had been struggling to keep his business afloat for years, sinking deeper and deeper into debt, drinking far more, and becoming angrier by the day. I told myself for a very long time that it was just the stress. They would find his way out of it, but I think I knew better. His temper had sharpened into something dangerous now, and the more I tried to talk to him, the worse it would get. When he shoved me into the kitchen counter during an argument, I knew it was time to go. He didn't hit me, I guess, not technically, but I saw the look in his eyes that night and the way his hands clenched and then unclenched, like he was debating his next move, and I was not about to wait around to see where it went. The next day, I met with a lawyer. I told Mark that we were done, and at first, I don't think he took it seriously. He laughed when I said that I'd filed. That was the moment that I realized I thought I'd never leave him, that I didn't have it in me. Then he was indeed served those papers, and I think the reality finally sank in. We split immediately after, and he left me the house and found a rental across the city. It was a quick, easy move while we got everything settled. The rage that followed was way worse than I expected, though. He called in the middle of the night, drunk and slurring, saying that I was ruining his life. He'd leave me these cryptic voicemails, some pleading and then some threatening. Then one morning, I found out that all my tires had been slashed. I went back to the police and filed a restraining order. And that ended up being the tipping point. He had shown violence against me, my things, and there was this utter lack of respect that I'm not going to deal with. I was his wife for over 15 years. Childlike behavior is just simply unacceptable. After all that, Mark disappeared. He was bar crawling. He never called me. He stopped showing up at work. At first, it was relief, but the silence kind of put me more on edge. I didn't feel like he had moved on. I just felt like he was waiting. Everything had been signed, but all the proceedings were still in motion, and we had yet to agree on all the final splits. That being said, I'm not going to hunt the guy down. I just continued with my usual routine. Self-care in the morning, then to work, then back home to relax and decompress at night. I watched my shows, ate dinner, and went to bed at the same time that I always did. I was dead asleep when I heard the noise. At first, it was just the wind rattling the doors, but then something else came, this scraping sound, low and consistent like metal against wood. I sat up listening. Then a sharp pop. The bedroom door exploded open. The moment the doors burst open, my body reacted before my brain even could. I scrambled back against the headboard, hands flying up instinctively. The figure storming into the room was massive in the dark. His silhouette was broad, his movements very aggressive. I barely had any time to scream before he was on me. A heavy hand slammed over my mouth, pushing my head back into the pillow. I kicked wildly, my knee connecting with something solid. A grunt of pain, but it didn't seem to slow him down. Plastic. I felt plastic slicing into my wrists, pinching my skin. Zip ties. I thrashed harder, my breath barely coming in against the calloused palm covering my mouth. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely even hear my muffled cries. I fought as hard as I could, but it didn't really matter. It was far too strong. He yanked me out of bed, my legs barely even catching beneath me. I buckled, and he grabbed my hair, pulling me upright. A sharp, searing pain shot through my scalp as I stumbled forward. My chest heaved, and I sucked in gulps of air, the scream now trapped in my throat by a thick wad of fabric that had been shoved into my mouth. A sock, damp, tasting like sweat and dirt. And I gagged. He dragged me across the room, his grip like iron around my arm. His feet barely even kept up as I was pulled down the hallway throughout the darkened house. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and whiskey. I twisted trying to glance at his face, but he was wearing a mask. Not a ski mask, but a plastic one, like something you'd buy at a dollar store for Halloween. It caught the dim glow of the nightlight in the hallway, smooth and featureless, a hollow expression, and it scared the absolute life out of me. He shoved open the front door, hauling me outside. My feet barely had even touched the cold concrete of the porch, and I realized just how real this actually was. This wasn't a nightmare. I was not dreaming. This wasn't one of Mark's mind games, the silent phone calls or slashed tires. This was something else entirely. I was being abducted for sexual assault or murder. I had no phone, and no one knew where I would be. The moment we stepped into the yard, panic hit me like a truck. My body started revolting, kicking, twisting, trying to shake him off. He yanked harder on my hair and dragged me forward. The the sharp brambles of the lawn cutting up my feet. The car, my car, parked in the driveway, driver's side door wide open. Whoever this was, he had my keys. I let out a choke muffled scream as he forced me toward the trunk. I tried to plant my feet, but he was faster and he was stronger. He threw open the trunk, and the next thing I knew, my feet were off the ground, world tilting, and then darkness. Trunk slamming shut behind me. The last thing I saw was his hand, gripping the edge of the trunk, a familiar watch looking down on me, and then gone. That air inside the trunk was thick and stifling. My own breath bounced back at me in quick panic bursts. I twisted, testing these zip ties around my wrists. They were painfully tight, digging into my skin. My ankles were bound too, cutting off the circulation. The engine roared to life, and then he was driving to where I had no idea. Time seemed to stretch and blur. My head was throbbing where it hit the edge of the trunk, where he'd thrown me in. The sock in my mouth made it impossible to breathe deeply. The wet fabric started to force itself down my throat. I continued to focus on the motion of the car, the turns, the bumps in the road. I tried to form some kind of map in my head, anything that might help me figure out exactly where I was going. But there was nothing, just the low hum of the tires against the asphalt. And then out of nowhere, the car slams to a stop, and I froze. For a really long time, nothing happened. I could just hear him breathing in the driver's seat, the occasional shift of fabric as he moved around. Was he just thinking? Was he trying to decide what to do next? I don't know. Terror then clawed up my throat. Worst case scenarios playing off in my head, looping endlessly. He's gonna dump me in a river, bury me in the woods, set the car on fire with me inside. The trunk popped open and cool night air rushed in. He stood there, looking down at me, and then reached up and pulled off the mask. Mark. I knew it before I saw him. I'd known it the second he grabbed me. His face was red and sweaty, his hair was disheveled. His eyes were wild, darting across my face like he was waiting for a reaction. When I didn't give him one, he bared his teeth at me. You know, you're such a fucking bitch, do you know that? You're such a fucking bitch, do you know that? My chest rose and fell, rapid breaths that I could not control. I gave you everything. Everything. I worked my ass off for this family, and you just go and throw it all away. He reached into the back seat and pulled something out. A gas can. My stomach turned to ice. Anything but this. God, no. He popped off the cap, and the pungent sweet smell of gasoline quickly filled the air. Without any hesitation, he poured it all over me, and the shock of it made me suck in a deep breath. It was ice cold, soaking into my clothes, my hair, everything. The fumes burning my nose, my eyes. I coughed and gagged at the thick stench of it. Mark just stood over me, holding the can. You don't get to walk away. You don't get to ruin my life and move on like I never existed. My throat closed. He was really gonna burn me alive. I tried to speak, but the sock muffled everything into these desperate, pitiful sounds. Tears burned my eyes. My whole body shook. He pulled out his lighter and flicked it open. I sobbed. The noise was raw and animalistic. Then, in this last desperate attempt, I begged. Not for my life, though, for a phone call. Please. My voice was hoarse, almost unintelligible. Please let me talk to them. One last time. Mark just frowned. Talk to who? Our kids. I barely even said the words. Just let me say goodbye, please. His fingers twitched around the lighter. His face was twisted and unreadable. For a long, agonizing moment, I thought he would refuse. Then, finally, he pulled out my phone out of his pocket. I hold it, he said. You say anything about what's happening right now, I'll hang up. I I just nodded back frantically. I won't. He scrolled through my contacts, scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, then stopped. I felt my heart race, but this was it. He hit call and held the phone to my ear. The phone rang once, twice, then
Mom?
it was our daughter. Her voice was groggy and confused, probably half asleep. She lived in the dorms on campus. I sucked in a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, baby. Mark watched me closely, the glow of the lighter casting these flickering shadows across his menacing face.
It's so late.
She mumbled.
Are you okay?
I swallowed pure gasoline. Yeah, I'm okay. I just wanted to call you, to say hi. There was a pause, and then a softer,
You're crying.
I clenched my jaw, forcing out this weak laugh. It's nothing. I just miss you. Mark's grip on the phone was tight, his fingers white-knuckled.
I miss you too, Mom.
She said. Her voice warmed up a little.
You're gonna be in my game next week, right?
I closed my eyes. Say yes, keep her talking. Of course I am, I whispered back.
Good.
She said, as if she didn't doubt it for a second.
We're gonna crush them this season, you know?
Mark shifted, his jaw tightening and his lips were pressing together. I continued to press forward. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Maybe after we can get some ice cream, just you and me. I heard the smile in her voice.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Mark exhaled sharply through his nose, and I turned my gaze on him, locking eyes. I know you. I know what this means to you. You should go to the game too, I said softly. His face twitched. She heard me.
Dad's coming?
Mark didn't answer. He was just staring at me now, his expression still unreadable. I don't know, baby, maybe, I said, still holding his gaze. But I do know that he loves you. Silence. Mark's grip on the lighter faltered. His eyes flickered, and his breath steadied.
Mom?
I love you, I said quickly because I didn't know how much longer I had.
I love you too, Mom.
Mark's shoulders slumped. The tension bled out of him like an air from a balloon. He pulled the phone away and stared at the screen for a long moment. And then, with shaking hands, he ended the call. The lighter clicked shut. He turned away and paced in the slow circle, dragging a hand down his face. I didn't move. I barely even dared to take a breath. Finally, he turned back to me. His face had changed. There was something in his eyes now. Exhaustion, regret. Get up, he muttered to me. I blinked, unsure if I heard him right. Get up. I rolled onto my side, my arms still bound behind me. He cursed under his breath and dug into his pocket, pulled out a pocket knife. With a few quick slices, those zip ties snapped free. My arms burned as blood rushed back into them. My wrists were swollen and raw. Mark then walked to the car door and wrenched it open. Get in. I hesitated. I'm just taking you home, he said. I couldn't believe it. My body was refusing to move at first, like it didn't trust what was happening now. But slowly, I pushed myself up and climbed into the passenger seat. The car ride was silent, the scent of gasoline still clinging to me, making my stomach churn. I kept my hands in my lap, fingers twisted together, trying to keep them from shaking. When we pulled up to my house, I expected him to say something, apologize, beg, justify himself, but he did none of those things. He just stared at the wheel for a long time, breathing slow and deep, like he was forcing himself to remain calm. Finally, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys. Then, without another word, got out of the car, walked to his own, and drove away. I sat there in my driveway, heart still hammering and body trembling. Then slowly, with shaking fingers, I picked up my phone and called the police. Mark ended up turning himself in an hour later. He got 18 months. 18 months, yeah, that's it, for breaking into my house, 18 months for kidnapping me, 18 months for almost setting me on fire. He ended up getting out in less time than that, but he never bothered me again. Maybe he got some therapy, maybe he found God, or maybe in those last moments when he heard our daughter's voice on the phone, when he realized what he was about to take from her, maybe he finally saw himself for who he really was, and maybe, for the very first time, he was afraid of himself too.